in the very deepest part of yourself, you are something quite different from a physical body. Because this is the key point to being able to have a contact and connection with the Supreme Being. So a soul is genderless. Now, it's very unusual for a person to think, I am neither male nor female. Because as soon as you are born, the first question that is asked is, what is it? Is it a boy or a girl? You see, and this is a misleading question. Nobody asks, who is it? So our whole consciousness from birth is that we are taught to think of ourselves as a what, not a who. And the body is a physical object that you can draw pictures of, take photographs of, and you know, according to vital signs, whether the body is with life or without life. Have you all seen a corpse? Yes? Must have. As you get older, you will. More and more people die as you get older. But when you see a corpse, it's very clear to you that the person is not there. Right? Everything is there except the person. And seeing a corpse is very helpful to make us realize that the person is actually something quite different from the corpse, the body. And this energy, this being that gives life to the body is actually genderless and discarnate. Means it is not of the body. Now, the Supreme Soul is also like that. Genderless. We say him for God, but it's not a him from the perspective of being male. You also say for God, you are the mother, you are the father. So, people can think of God as a mother and a father, but then you still think of some kind of a female something and some kind of a male something. But it's very difficult to think of as someone who is genderless. Right? But you have to start thinking about that. Another point which can be helpful is to understand that God is an extraterrestrial. We are also coming from somewhere else onto this earth, into physical bodies, which makes us terrestrial. But otherwise, you remember where we went yesterday in meditation, that world of light? That is also called nirvana, which simply means the place where there is no sound. Not even the sound of a thought. So, complete and total stillness, which is only possible when you are not in the body. If the soul is not in the body, it cannot think, cannot talk, cannot do anything. And so we require bodies to actually perform action. So this is why in the IT world we very often use the analogy of the software and the hardware. If you have a hardware, no software, can't do anything. If you have software, no hardware, can't do anything. You need the two together. In the same way, the soul is really the software. It has all the information. And the body is the equipment that will reflect, demonstrate, and reveal the information that's in the software. So, to know about the self, there are two things. One is, what am I? And then the other, much more difficult, is, who am I? So we start with the what. What am I? I'm a soul. It's a what. Even though it's not physical, it's still a what. But then who you are, has everything to do with the quality of being that you are. For example, in India, the word Atma is qualified Mahatma, Jivatma, Devatma, Papatma. So God is called Param Atma, the supreme among all souls. We are human souls with human bodies. We reincarnate. You cannot reincarnate as an animal or a bug or a worm or a bee or an elephant or any of that, because the soul is a seed. And whatever seed is planted in the soil, that plant will come. And so when you plant a soul in the human body is what? It's made of the same ratio of the elements of air, earth, fire, water and ether as you have on the planet. Right? Your body is about 70% water. Your digestion is the fire. You have dust, right? Earth. So basically the soul is accommodated in a leather bag of warm mud. Is that right? When you look at yourself in the mirror, you don't think like that. But I'm putting it like that so that you can consider it in terms which encourage you to disidentify with your face and the rest of your body. But otherwise, in body consciousness, we are identified with what you see when you look in the mirror. So your identity has to do with your nationality, your culture, your color, your race, your language, etc. But a soul is neither male nor female. God, the Supreme Soul, is neither male nor female. But we human beings, human souls, we are in an eternal relationship with the Supreme Being. So whether you're alive or dead, it makes no difference. Because you are still in relationship with the Supreme Being. Through however many lives you take, you still maintain that relationship with the Supreme Being. So it is a permanent relationship. Your body is temporary, and your bodily relations are also temporary. So something which is temporary is not called sat, it's not called true, right? So what is true is something that is permanent and always. So the existence of you as a soul is true, it's permanent. The existence of God, the Supreme, is permanent. So then, question arises, what is the name of God? What is your name? You have a name given to you by your parents and your astrologer according to your birth and your Rashi and all this. And when you die, then you lose that name. And then when you take birth, some other person gives you some other name, which will last as long as your body. And of course, your soul doesn't need an individual name because you interact through your body. So the name of your soul is just soul. But if you call out to somebody, oh soul, nobody will know which one you mean, so you get an individual name. But the Supreme Soul has a name of the soul, which it doesn't change. And that name is Shiva. I see. And it's called an attributive name. That means the name defines that particular soul. So Shiva has certain meanings. One meaning is benefactor, Kalyankari, benefactor. That means that from God you can only receive benefit. You will not receive any harm. God does not do any damage to anyone or anything. And otherwise, people, they do benefit and they do harm. So there is some fundamental differences between human souls and the Supreme Soul. Shiv also means the seed. And so the seed refers to the contents of the soul. And so the sanskaras of God, the contents of that soul, is information about the soul himself, the creator, and the creation. The creation means everything that is there in the physical universe, and all the information about all the human souls and the roles that they play throughout history, from the beginning through the middle to the end. And the totality about the material universe, what it is, where it came from, how it's going, and where it's going, and then what, you see, which is normally unknown. And so this is the speciality of God, the Supreme Being. He knows everything. Shiv also means zero, shunya. So zero means, you don't know, it's neither positive nor negative number. And zero is not nothing, it's something, but it's not one, it's zero. So mathematically it's very deep, it's very subtle, the concept of zero. So knowing these things, getting information about this, causes your mind and your intellect to start to think, because you have to process the information in order for it to take a place in your understanding. Yoga is also called a relationship. So for us to be in communion and communication with the Supreme Being, we have to be, first of all, able to bring ourselves onto the same plane of existence as the Supreme Being. And so Shiva is called incorporeal. Incorporeal means nirakari. So nirakari does not mean that there is no form, but it does mean that there is no physical form. So the form of God is a point. And from a geometrical point of view, a point doesn't exist. Because it has no length, no breadth, no height, no thickness. But it is nevertheless something. And a point, being there but infinitesimally small, is also the gateway between the physical dimension and the non-physical dimension. Because you have to go through, somehow you have to go through from where you are to where you're not. And that method is the point. So this is why yesterday I asked you to compress all of your sense of your being into a point, because that is also the form of you, the soul. Because you, the soul, are also incorporeal. And the incorporeal form is not subject to a deterioration in terms of physical existence. So the point form of the soul is eternal. When you think of yourself physically, you think of yourself in terms of your mortality. Is that right? You got born, you live, you get old, you die. What happened before birth? Before conception, before being in the embryo, what happens after death, you do not know, because those things cannot be discerned through your sense perceptions or any technological machinery which extends your sense perception. But you can know it by your intellect. So the way to understand God requires you to understand yourself. And so this is why we give importance to understand yourself, that you are not the body. You are not physical. You are not having this gender or that gender. You are not limited by time, but you operate in the dimension of time and space through your instrument, the human body. But you need to be able to disconnect yourself from your body without actually dying. Because once you're dead, you can't, track yourself, as it were. So it's a very simple thing, but it's unknown, that you separate yourself from your body through thought. An experiment that helps you to understand this is to ask yourself this question: are you where your body is, or are you where your mind is? Where your mind is, yeah. You could be sitting here thinking about home. Then where are you? You're actually home. And because we don't think of it that way, we're not used to thinking of it that way, we have to practice thinking about it that way, because it means that we are resetting our sense of what's really real. From a scientific point of view, the physical reality is real reality, and non-physical reality is probably not there. But now, since the maybe 1970s, theoretical physics has been changing that. And there is quite a trend where the theoretical physics are saying that there's too much evidence to indicate that there is a non-physical dimension that mirrors the physical dimension. And so it has to be taken into consideration as part of the continuum of physics. Though it is not accepted in the conventional university world of physics, but more and more theoretical physicists are saying it cannot be just what you know in quantum physics. It goes further than that. And so science and spirituality are coming closer, which is very helpful for us, because it means that when we talk about this sort of thing, the scientific community has a reference. And they say, yeah, we know about this, but we need to know more. God, Shiva, is not what you see in a Shiva temple. What do you see in a Shiva temple? You see an oval Shiva lingam, which is actually symbolic of the aura around a point of light. But for the purposes of worship, you have to have something big so that you can put, some milk and some flowers and various things, you see. So the processes of ritual worship have caused the subtleties of spiritual concepts to have been represented in gross ways. But we need to go back to what those representations actually represent. You will see in a Shiva temple also a trident. Or you will see on the Shiva lingam, you will see 3 lines, dot, you see. So these are also symbolic of basically the acts of God, because God does something. So one is God knows the totality of us and the creation. And how does God know that? We human beings know things in 2 ways. One way is information is passed down from the ancestors in the traditions. So you know some things that way. And then the other way you know things is by investigation and experiment and observation. And so science doesn't really give importance to information that's passed down through tradition, because it considers it a bit gross and a bit limited. And so it goes for the scientific method of investigation and observation and drawing conclusions that way. Now, God doesn't acquire knowledge. The knowledge that is within the intellect of God is total knowledge of the beginning, the continuation, and the end of all processes of change. Anything that happens in the world where we live is in a process of change. It comes into being, it persists for some time, and then it disintegrates and turns into something else. But everything is fundamentally made of these elements, chemical elements, and they come together in different arrangements. The stable elements, air, earth, water, fire, ether, are known to the ancients and still now. The soul is capable of being understood also when you think about this concept of the sixth element of light. So you've heard about that, the sixth element of light, which is also the same as what is known in Bhakti as Brahma Tattva, this element of Brahma. So that is light, which is also the same as Nirvana, which is the same as Paramdham or Shantidham, or there's lots of different words for it. And it is outside the limitations of the physical universe. So you can only go there with your mind. So one of the functions of the human mind is to go beyond the limits of the physical universe, because it can do that. And when you're doing meditation, you're learning how to go beyond those limits so that you can go and come freely and at will. Why would you go there? One reason is to become very sure that I, the self, cannot die. Any of you who have read the Gita know that the soul is described as impossible to destroy. You cannot wet it, you cannot drown it, you cannot dry it, you cannot burn it. It's not capable of being destroyed through any of the normal destructive processes. It's not material. You are such a thing. So the biggest problem for humans is a fear of death, especially violent death, you see, because you don't want pain. And so when you are aware through deep thought that in fact I am not this body, then you realize no one can kill me. They can destroy your costume, no doubt, but they cannot kill you. That changes things. Because people are controlled by fear and by bribery. These are the two ways. So these two things are known as Maya. You are susceptible to Maya means you can be controlled by fear or you can be bought. And they say everyone has a price, only when they do not know that I am actually, in the deepest part of myself, I am indestructible. And so meditation means again and again and again going to that awareness and to intensify that awareness so that it becomes really real for you, because then you can operate a whole different level. And this enables you to operate in tandem with God, the Supreme Being. You see? So, for example, you may have heard of the expression Shiv Shakti. Shiv Shakti refers to the goddesses. You may have seen in Navratri the puja of the goddesses. So who are these ladies with so many arms and so many weapons, riding on lions? You know, you wouldn't normally find women operating like that. It's usually a bit too scary, right? But weapons refer to powers. Shiva is called Sarvashaktivan. That means the owner of all powers. So what kind of powers do you need? People in this world think of it as financial power or weapon power or political power, something like this. So those are physical powers, but there are also spiritual powers. What kind of power do you get from God? First is you get the power to see through what is called third eye. See, everybody has a forehead with no eyes on it. So what is that eye that's in the middle there? That is the eye of the intellect. When you understand something, very often you use the expression, "Oh, I see what you mean." See, that means the third eye is the eye of the intellect which is educated in spiritual information, that you can see the non-physical as clearly as you can see the physical, which means you can operate in both dimensions. Now that changes everything, changes your capacity to operate in this world. When you connect mentally and intellectually with the Supreme Being, contained within the Supreme Being is a gigantic amount of energy. We have on this planet more or less 7 to 8 billion human souls, and all of them are thinking. And the thought of all the people on the planet Earth causes all the things that are happening. And what's happening at the moment is everything is happening very fast. Have you noticed? That is, the speed of things is because of the quantity of beings who are thinking and doing. Then, the quality of thought of all the people on the earth has a quantity of negativity which is extraordinary. Very, very high. Now the opposite of that, in terms of positivity, positive energy, will give you an idea of what's the energy of God. It's vast. The usefulness of God is that you can take that positive energy into yourself in such a way that it causes you to be able to have sustained pure thought indefinitely. That's very powerful. The negative thought, negative experiences, negative emotions that you may feel in any circumstance or situation is directly the result of your mind coming under the influence of your sense perception. So a little example of this is an insult. It's very easy for any small thing to be experienced as an insult. If somebody doesn't smile at you, you say, "What is this?" It's an insult. Or if somebody doesn't say good morning, it's an insult. Or if somebody doesn't pay attention to you when you come in somewhere, it's an insult. And that feeling that you have when you experience even the slightest insult, that's an energy of negativity, right? which we call body consciousness. We have that terminology for it, Dehabhiman. And this Dehabhiman, this involvement with sense perceptions, what you hear, what you see, what you feel, stops you from getting that energy from the Supreme Being. And so we want to not be prevented from getting that, because we have a right to take that. And so we practice to detach from sense perception. So that means when an insult comes along, you experience it in a completely neutral way. That means you don't take it personally. You just consider it with an attitude of detachment. That, oh, this soul is performing this role, but it's nothing to do with me, because I am connected with the Supreme Being, and I know what's going on, that things that could be taken as negative is optional. I don't have to. And once you use the option not to be affected, then the energy of your being is no longer getting drained out. You understand? So then you can accumulate enough energy to reverse the effect of this gravitational pull of matter, so that you can then transcend it and connect to that source and take it in. Like plugging yourself in to the electricity. But we, in electricity, your wires, they are insulated, otherwise it's a problem. Some of you may know that if you could tap into the free energy that's running around the universe, you wouldn't really need much in the way of power stations, because you could just get it. But it's difficult to get it. In the same way, on a spiritual level, we can get that energy from the Supreme Being, but we have to peel off this insulation of the physical body, so that you expose the soul to that source. That's what is yoga. There's contact between the soul and the Supreme Soul, but the size of the point is very small. And the distance between where you are and where God is not a physical distance, but it is nevertheless distant because of being on a different dimension. So you have to bring yourself to that dimension by mentally disconnecting from your physical body and using your power of concentration. Create something similar to a laser beam and hold it. But because it's very small, it's very subtle, your aim has to be very right. It's a bit similar to, space technology. You have to get a rocket to go to a planet several universes away. That's very precise. In the same way, very precisely, bring yourself to a point and focus your being on the point of the Supreme Being. Now, what do you need for that kind of focus? The most powerful energy that can hold your attention is actually love. Any of you ever been in love with someone? Probably. It usually happens. And when you're in love with somebody, then it is that person is in your mind all the time. Is that right? And so you don't have to try and remember them, because you're in love, you're connected. Usually you fall out of love after a while because they betray you, disappoint you, or bore you, or something like that. But so being in love with a human being is a temporary affair on the whole, but it's very intense, it's very powerful. And if you have had that experience, you know what it is, and you can, in a sense, transfer that to your connection with the Supreme Being. So a person who is a good yogi, they will have this characteristic that they will have actually intense love for God, and they will also have love for humanity. So if you look inside yourself and see, ask yourself this question. It's a deep question. Do I love God? Even if I don't know God, but do I love God? And do I love humanity? Because if you have this, you'll be able to do this practice more easily than if you don't. So what stops us is a kind of selfishness or egocentricity, where you're just worried about yourself. But if you are sure about yourself, then you're not worried about yourself. Then you can think of the other. So the first other is God, and the second other is humanity. You see? And so that energy from you to the object of your love is the thing that keeps you connected. You understand what I'm saying? And so you can get access to this when you go deep inside yourself. You see? But our culture, our world is very materialistic and oriented towards matter. So we love our body, and we love other people's bodies, and we love things, and we love places. Your ancestral home, you love that as your roots. Your relatives, you love them. These are bodies of other people. And your own body is your instinct for survival. You'll protect your body, you'll protect your izzat, your ego, your position, all of these things. And so these things are actually barriers to the connection with God. And so we need to use some tricks to get past these barriers. And so the first trick is to know, I cannot be killed, I am immortal. And the second trick is to know that all these people, they're temporary. You come into a relationship, it persists for some time. Either their lifetime or your lifetime is about as long as it can be. And then it's not there anymore. You see? And we have to think about these things to such an extent that we get it. You see? And then when we get it, then we can proceed further. So does all this make sense to you? Yeah? And so when you start to learn these things, you're operating on two levels all the time. You have your normal everyday things that you do, and then you have that spiritual dimension which you can go into anytime you want. And the idea is to create a workable balance so that in the everyday world, you do all the things you have to do, you discharge your responsibilities, do everything, and then have some time for taking care of yourself on the inner dimension. Because if you neglect your soul, you become too weak, too vulnerable, and then, you see, you can't take care of yourself at that level. And then the quality of your life is not so good because of that. So what we're trying to do with you here is to teach you how to make that connection. So from a technical point of view, it's all about getting as small as possible to a point. You can imagine a computer chip which is infinitesimally small and it has everything in it. You can do that, right? So that is what your soul is like. And that is also what the Supreme Soul is like. Now you connect your soul to the Supreme Soul, it gets completely realigned, recharged, reset, and rejuvenated. I see, because the soul is eternal and immortal, but it deteriorates. And it deteriorates to a certain point, which is the nadir, the lowest point. And then it has to come into contact with the Supreme Soul to get reset, to go back to the factory settings, original factory settings, where everything is working nicely. That means where the soul is completely filled with all the knowledge, all the power, and all the virtues of God, so that you become a very nicely ideal, created human being who is very like God, even though everyone is individual. You understand? So this is what this is about. And nobody will do it for you. You have to do it for yourself. All we do is give you the information. And then what you have to do is practice to be as small as possible. And then leave the everyday world by your mind. Go there and explore the mind of God. Interesting? Not scary? Little bit scary. Yeah. Why would we be scared of that? There's a very special reason. Is because God is perfect and I'm not. So if God would see me being imperfect, I would lose face. So that's the problem, losing face. Now, if you would be in a war, shot up with bullet wounds, and you go to the hospital, they are going to take off all your clothes, and they're going to take out all the bullets and sew you up, and that's it. They will see everything about you. So it's a little bit like that. So we have to not mind, because God loves you. And God knows all your weaknesses and loves you anyway. God knows all the mistakes you've done and says, don't worry about it. He doesn't bother about it. So, then what? Nothing, I see. So the soul comes to God in a rather wrecked state and somewhat, dirtied, corrupted, and so on and so on and so forth. And God will say, well, if you're perfect, there's no need for me. There's only a need for me to work on you when you are in that state of depletion, corruption, etc. I see. So what we have to do is be very sure that it's okay. Nothing's going to happen. God is not going to say, oh, you horrible soul, No, nothing like that. It's going to say, oh, my sweet child, how nice. We've come together. Now, let's talk. So God teaches all these things. Where do you think we know all this from? It comes from that source. And then we want to, open ourselves out, go there, and just receive. So the first thing we have to receive is peace. That's the first thing. Go further. Next thing you need, you need a lot of love. Right? Because love is a really good energy. When somebody loves you a lot, you feel good, right? But it's never enough. Because the human being is already depleted. They don't have very much for their own selves, let alone for anybody else. But God, there's no limit. So you just plug in and start taking it in. The peace, the love, light, power, take that in. And just, what it does is it realigns all the different bits of you. So everything is just lined up nicely, and you do a defragmentation, how much better your computer works. So it's like that. Soul is absolutely fragmented. And you want to line it up, charge it up, get all that corrosion out so that you become, it's a real rejuvenation process. And what you have to do is make that connection and hold it. But it's a very precise one. It's very slippery. So you can maybe hold it for some seconds and then it slips out. And you have to again reconnect it. So do not expect too much of yourself when you're doing yoga at this level, because it's very precise and it moves. But what you do, you use a circling method to help you stay focused. Have you seen how a gyroscope works? You know a gyroscope? It spins. You must have all ridden a bicycle. A bicycle, when it's not moving, it will fall down. When it's moving, it won't fall down. Why? Because any wheel which is turning stays in the same plane. Now that's a wheel turning vertically, and one turning horizontally is like a helicopter. The rotary wings of a helicopter operates as a gyroscope, so it stops it wobbling. So in ships, in airplanes, in submarines, in rockets, they must have a gyroscope so it doesn't wobble. If you know about weapons, I don't know you know about weapons, but there's a thing called a rifle. And a rifle, in the barrel of the gun of the rifle, there are some grooves which cause the bullet to spin. You know cricket, right? You need to spin the ball, otherwise it won't go where you want. And so when you spin your mind, you can actually hold it steady. So you need to develop this. Because if you put something like that, it becomes like rigid. But if you spin, it can be very precise without being rigid. So that means your thought, keep the thoughts moving around the point. That is called spinning. And you will stay near the point. You won't get chopped off somewhere, distracted. Keep it spinning, keep the thoughts. That's why we talk a lot, because we have to give you lots of points to use to keep spinning and keep connected. And then when you're really concentrated through this spinning, the next stage is you open yourself up, because you're held steady. You can open up and then it really comes in. Fill your heart, fill your mind, fill your being with all these qualities. You understand what I'm saying? So let's try that. We do a meditation commentary and we'll do all these things together. Then afterwards you can have some questions if you like. Do we have some music? Are you sitting balanced, comfortable? So you don't have to think about your body. And then take it gently. First of all, turn the attention within. Feel all the energy of your being spread throughout. feel ready to take on the world. And so gently disconnect yourself and return gently back. And reconnect with your body, back in the room. And hold that energy to yourself so it stays with you. Before we do that, I just want to know, was it easier today than yesterday? And you can imagine every time you do this, it's easier, it's deeper, it's clearer, because you're getting used to it, yeah? So you must practice it, because it's subtle, and if you practice it, you make it quite solid and strong. Otherwise it can sort of disappear and you say, oh, what was that? I had it, but I don't have it anymore. So, yeah, we have a bit of time for your questions, so please. Of course. Exactly. So let me put it like this. Once the soul comes into the dimension of matter, you can't come out until you've completed the time cycle. You may have 84 births or some other quantity. Different souls have different quantities of births. But in the path of bhakti, they speak about the cycle of 84. But 84 what? They don't know. So we are taught it's 84 births in a time cycle. That's short, you know. Human life is cyclical. You have the life cycle of a frog, you learn that in school. And then you have the life cycle of a light bulb. Or you have the life cycle of a human, you know. You have the agricultural cycles. You have the astrological cycle, 28,000 years, all the stars go back to their right places. And so there's a lot of cycles. And usually people think of, you know, if you're a regular scientist, you will say that there was a big bang 14 billion years ago, right? Big bang. And then, after another 14 billion years, there'll be another Big Bang. But that's a long time, so we're okay, you know. So, we exist between Big Bangs. And then, what made the first Big Bang happen? We don't know. And what's after the next Big Bang? We don't know. So basically it's linear thinking. Even if it's as long as 28 billion years, it still has an end of the line. In spiritual thinking, we learn circular thinking. So you can say, if you think of cause and effect, last cause, last effect, first cause. It continues. There's no stopping. So to think of yourself as having no beginning and no end means there never was a time when you individually did not exist. That's very difficult to think about. So you need a long time. Think about it. Because you have to also think about the experience of death in a fearless way. So anyone who trains to be a warrior, they practice this, because a warrior sooner or later will be killed, usually. So you have to learn how to die. A yogi has to learn how to die, because one of these days you will leave your body. And what we want to do is leave our body consciously, by our own will. So mostly people say, well, I don't want to do that. But anyway, now,
during the intervening period, where we are, there is no beginning, no end, we are in the circular loop.
we go home.
That was my first question, that if we go home, do we go home 84 times?
No, one time. You see, so there is a movement round and round on this earth and up and down. So you go round however many births, then you go up, then you come down, you go round, up, down, round, round. Then people say, what's the point? They always say that. The point is this, that there is no final anything. So in terms of our desire for a final something, there is an encounter with God that every soul has, which can be considered as the peak experience of all peak experiences, and that can be your final point. But still, in the world of light, there is no time and no space. Here on earth, we have time and space. These are dimensions in which action occurs. So we are sometimes in the world of time and space doing action, sometimes in the world of nirvana doing nothing. And so if you are there for 1 second or 4,999 years, it doesn't make any difference because there's no time. So when we talk about this 5,000-year cycle, it is because we choose that if there's no time up there, let me be down here and go through the whole cycle, all of history and geography, because I don't need to miss anything. That's my position about it. Some people, they say, no, we don't like down here, it's too unpleasant. We want to stay there. But you can't stay there forever because your existence is proved by coming onto the earth, coming into a body and performing your role, you see. So there's no soul that goes to nirvana and never comes back. We must come back. So this question, who are you? You could say that the totality of the roles that I play on this earth and my performance here, the quality of my performance, that totality, you could say, that is who am I. Who am I right now is just the last little bit, so it's not a very good description of the totality of my identity, you see. So but these are very deep points, very deep points. It takes you forever to figure this out, you know. But so we give you this basic information which is incomprehensible. And some people, they say yes without understanding, but they just say yes. And then some people, they say no, you see. So if a person says, yes, it makes sense to me, then they will try to figure it out further, you see. But this is very tricky stuff. We call it easy Rajayoga. It's not that easy. Not that easy because it's very subtle. So the thing to understand is that we're learning to see ourselves in terms of the totality, the entirety of me, not just this one little section of this birth only, because we can't understand ourselves from that. And then we have to be clear that I can never be not existing. Sometimes I'm there with God, but even then you wouldn't be able to experience God because you have to be here on the earth in a body with a brain to separate yourself from your body consciously and remember God, then you can experience God. Otherwise you can't, you see. When you're dead, you're already dead. So you have to, in your life, know what it's like to separate from your body so that you can go and explore that area while being with a brain and a body. Because without that you can't experience, you see. So it's subtle. Does it make sense to you? You have to think. You have to think deep. I mean, I've been thinking about this for 40 years, you know. I'm still thinking. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Yes, please.
As you told us, without brain we can't think about that.
No, right, yes. Man, buddhi, sanskara. These are called faculties. Faculties. It means your soul can think. That's called the mind. The mind isn't a thing. It's an ability. It's also like a sense organ to sense non-physical things. You know, an intellect is your capacity to differentiate true and false, light and dark, good and bad. It's a faculty. It's like your eyes. In your eyes, you have two kinds of cells. You have one which sees color, another one which sees shape. So people who wear glasses, like me, normally, is because those cells don't work so well. So you have to have lenses to sharpen up. But you can see colour all right. Then there's some people, they're colourblind or they can't see properly colours. So there'll be nothing you can do about that. So your mind is like, you see the colours. Your intellect, you see the shape. So you need the both to have proper visual experience. And to understand, especially spiritual things, you need your mind to feel them, to feel the impact of the meaning. And you need your intellect to figure it out, you see. And then sanskaras, that's another whole thing, you see, because sanskaras is like your role. You're an actor, you have a role, you know. And whatever you do goes back inside and creates a tendency or a trend. And so you can understand a person by observing them. I usually need to see somebody for a year, then I can understand their sanskaras, you know, how they are likely to operate. Because everybody has very different sanskaras, you see, so it takes a while to understand someone. And when you're in a relationship, you always have a clash of sanskaras because you do things differently, you see things differently. And it takes forever to really harmonize with another person because of that, you see. And so to be able to be skilled at using the mind, the intellect, and work the sanskaras into a pure way, that's a lot of... She's saying that I need to send you for breakfast, and I'm going to be back here 11:30 only for questions. So can we do that? 11:30, you write down your question, don't forget, and practice these things, and they'll create new questions. Okay?